Greetings YouTube, Khundes here, and welcome to a retrospective, well, kind of episode into our world conquest attempt as France. Lots of things went wrong, lots of things just came from the fact I just had no idea whatever the hell I was doing. And, yeah, so we're gonna discuss them. There will not necessarily be kind of like an order to things, because I'll be all over the place as things come back to me. I want to start with the most glaring, obvious one, the Burgundian inheritance. When that went wrong, well, it happened at the kind of appropriate time. Like, the timing of it was right. The fact the Netherlands went to Spain, though, like, essentially set the tone for the entire run. I didn't think it would be as big of a deal as it was, but when you look at just the trade the map mode, like, there's currently 30 ducats going in here that I can't even touch because I have one Seine estuary. I would have had, like, Antwerp and Holland feeding more trade power here. I would have had passively a larger, way larger amount of trade power from it. This would have in turn given me a lot of economy. Mind you, I never actually played the trade game. I couldn't afford to have a fleet, what with always being at war with England. Like, there was no point to fighting the naval war, and I mean, I effectively conquered England without a fleet. So boats were not really a concern, they were actually a distraction. But, all that to say, like, without the trade power from the English Channel that I could have tapped in here, like, it made the economy suffer quite a lot because I had to fight aggressively. I had to keep fighting. That's the rule of, like, the basic rule of the world conquest is you can't be at peace for too long. And I was at peace for too long very often, in part because I was saddled with crippling debt for like 150 years of playtime. Like, how long have I been saying gotta repay loans, gotta repay loans? My inflation is still not done recovering, even though I have, like, stuff bumping it down. And this ties in neatly to the fact that, like, I should not have needed to take economic ideas. All things considered, this idea was, like, really something that I did not need to take. Like, if it was a well done, a well thought out, a well played world conquest, I would not have needed economic. I essentially put myself in crippling debt the first time I had a coalition war against, like, this giant Spain monster. Primarily because I just couldn't afford to fight him head on. Like, I was going for a world conquest, he was bigger than me for most of it. Like, that to me is just wrong. That was the very biggest, like, everything fell down from that point on, and I didn't realize it until much later. There is, of course, my addiction to debt that, you know, helped us win wars in short term. It was so pyrrhic, I just couldn't justify, like, bigger wars. I barely even expanded in the HRE despite being in the Emperor. Only at the end did I start going for Bavaria, which, you know, admittedly was a nice play, but the aggressive expansion, like, it turned out that Austria was way stronger than I gave him credit for. That went really wrong. The Ottomans I actually beaten pretty well. I really hope Hungary hadn't eaten all of this. Like, the fact Hungary was so big was a really big pain, and, like, that I had to deal with the whole time. I never actually fought him, which is fantastic, but he was a giant problem. But Hungary isn't really a big factor. The other big factor that I really had to deal with, and that I have to admit to myself, I rely a lot, and I do mean a lot, on vassal feeding. And I still have the mindset of playing that is pre-1.16, where you start the game, you know, you run to Admin Tech 5, you unlock your first idea. I love unlocking influence first. I think influence is a fantastic idea group because I love diplomatic annexation cost, which plays with the fact I love vassal feeding. I love aggressive expansion impact. This essentially allows us to take more land for less coalitions. I love the extra Diplo slot, it's just useful. I love the Diplo reputation. Like, this like the ideas from 3 to 6 in influence are just good. Like the first two are garbage. The finisher is kind of underwhelming, and Marcher Lords is also completely useless. But the ideas in the middle are fantastic. Quantity is also a great idea to have. I mean, I ran out of manpower all the time. And some of it is because I play really poorly when it comes to managing armies, and like I take attrition that I shouldn't be taking. Part of it is just that like big wars against big stacks where like 240 stacks ram into each other. When you come out with a 20 stack, you need 20k manpower to replenish it. I'm actually surprised I still have manpower. So quantity is like pretty much a given when you're trying to world conquest. It's not about, you know, the quality of troops. At some point, like you become like you need to reach the threshold to unlimited expansion, and once you reach that point, the only limiter, like manpower, becomes the only real limit. Because if you're fighting like Scandinavian armies, it doesn't matter that they have a 60 stack. You can drop 200 people in their face and kill it anyway. So that was fine. Admin ideas also essential, arguably even before quantity. But I was running low on manpower from the get-go because I was constantly fighting Spain and England at that point. So I needed quantity, but admin ideas, that core creation cost, also like I should have been a lot more balanced in terms of both vassal feeding versus what I eat. So that's kind of it. Aside from like here, economics should really have been humanist. Like I'm still fighting these giant rebel stacks of dew, and it's just like it's unbearable. It's like I'm losing so many resources fighting rebels that just I could have just avoided by having like local traditions and better tolerance of all of the heretics and the heathens, and also better relations over time is the other side to the aggressive expansion impact minus 20% coin. Like this also allows me to expand way more rapidly because aggressive expansion decay is the second most important thing after aggressive expansion impact, I would say. I might even say that this might be more important even. Because like you build up to 50 AE and then you wait for it to go down, and this effectively makes you wait less time. Like this lets you take more, but this makes you wait less, and I think this might even be better. Yeah, so that's pretty much it for the ideas, and aside from these four, these are the four quintessential world conquest ideas, like, that I believe they are, from my understanding and from looking at other people actually succeeding at world conquests. Like, they are the optimal ideas. Like, they're the first four. You normally want to go for exploration at some point to let you discover the rest of the world, although I would say at this point, I wouldn't really need exploration. I have discovered the entire world. I'm missing these islands, but they would come in time. I would get the discovery spread on its own, I'm fairly certain. Yeah, so that's pretty much what went wrong necessarily when it came to ideas. Become the Holy Roman Empire without intending to reform the HRE was like me thinking way too highly of my ability to goal things. It is possible. It is possible to become the HRE, not unite the Empire, and still like just eat the Empire. Like, I just didn't want to go grayskin because I wanted to be France. Like, how does France be great when they're not France, right? So I was aiming for that. But that was like hubris on my part and a really poor decision in the end, because I wasn't able to really do anything with the HRE. One thing I realized I could have done if I had been like more mindful, and like I was thinking of doing it before, you know, the campaign ended with my new emperor that died. Like, when this guy took over, you get 10 AE, and even 10, not AE but IE, and with that you can actually just like, I could have added a lot, like essentially all of my provinces to the HRE, and then institute race regiment. That would have been amazing because it would have given me like the Diplo reputation, and I don't know if I get national unrest without being emperor. But I think I would have, and that would have also really helped. Like, again, to deal with the really big problems. This is just useful. Like, I should have aimed for at least Hofgate each. Like, that core creation cost would have been so important, and yearly legitimacy would also have been so important. This is kind of useless, and after that it's like other really big things, but like HRE bonuses are so good, and for me to aim to become Emperor and not do anything with them was like really foolish. Like I screwed up when it came to that too. And of course, when it came to things that went wrong, it did take forever for me to actually become the HRE and wrest it from Austria. I should have been able to take it much faster. But Austria lived into the late 16s, like, I think his guy was like 69 or something when he finally died, and the game starts with him being like, what, 20, I think? I think the first Austrian ruler starts at age 20. He lived for 46 years. That is way too long to become HRE Emperor. And I needed him to die before Burgundy exploded so that I could inherit it. So like, it really delayed things a lot, because I couldn't afford to get too much aggressive expansion from that point on, until Burgundy exploded, and then I didn't end up getting the Netherlands. So that sucked. Togort and the amount of effort I put into defeating Portugal without actually a police force to kill the Portuguese rebels, like, I am honestly surprised myself at how useless vassals have been this whole playthrough. Like, I've had this giant Togort as a vassal for the longest time. I've never seen him spawn more than like 5 or 6 troops. Cyprus brought maybe like a maximum of 10 troops despite being this giant, like, lurching beast, and he wasn't ever providing me with more than 10 troops. Iraq, I think, has like 6 or 7 troops, and he's like really big too. Like Hejaz, by comparison, has like 20 something, and he's like a sad like thing compared to it. So yeah, I'm really disappointed with the performance of vassals in general. Like, even Portugal, at his biggest extent as my vassal, had like 6 or 8 troops, and he kept spawning these like 15-20 stacked rebels that he just couldn't deal with. So like, I completely really needed to babysit him, and I did not. That is something I would definitely change in the future. Like, I would definitely, like, if I went the vassal feeding route, I would assume that my vassal is unable to safeguard his own realm and provide troops for it, which is, at the same time, a really big waste of resources. Like, I would expect the vassal to be able to deal with it. Which is probably also why, like, world conquest attempts don't necessarily tend to keep vassals around for as long as I have. But that happened. When I fought Persia, the one time I fought Persia offensively and I took these 2 provinces, I should have won way more handily. Like, I should have put way more troops towards that victory, because I was fighting Persia and Bamanis. Bamanis should have become my protectorate, like, in that war. That was like, what, 1640s, I think, that I started this war, maybe early 1650s. Like, at that point in the 1650s, the world conquest attempt was looking really, really flaky, but it was still theoretically possible. Protectorate Bamanis, Protectorate Delhi, feed the rest of India to these 2. Persia, just like shove it inside Iraq and forget about it. That would have worked. Ming had never exploded, which was actually a blessing, because I could have protectorated him in one fell swoop. One war, all of this is mine. And I could have just like spam protectorated everything around here and been fine. But I failed to break through Persia. I failed to protectorate Bamanis in time. And at that point, it just was not happening. And I mean, the problem too is that Iraq at this point, he was Western. So I could like fight Persia. And I think, no, Persia had not westernized yet. So I could just like feed Persia to Iraq. But as soon as like Delhi and Iraq would have touched, Delhi probably could have westernized and this would have been a problem. So I would have had to keep Persia as a buffer until he started westernizing. Maybe even like after he westernized, like if I, yeah. That would have been important to make sure that prevent all of Eastern Asia from westernizing. Russia, I was hoping to actually just PU. I played the PU game really poorly. Mind you, the PU game is really hard to play in the current version, because you cannot really aim to PU allies unless you're lucky. And I was not lucky, despite sharing a dynasty with the Commonwealth. The PU war was a mistake, but at that point I was just... Well, there was no PU war itself, but the PU idea of like trying to PU the Commonwealth was actually just me being desperate at this point. It like the world conquest was looking really dire, and like, I mean, it effectively went to shit. There is no recovering from this. Well, I mean, I'm still very strong. I could still keep the game going as a game and just like win back all of the land from Spain and, you know, fight a really hard-fought war against them, but like a lot of my cores actually expired or deleted from this. This is like this is kind of irrelevant at this point. But yeah, I could keep the campaign going, but the world conquest is just not happening anymore, which makes me very sad. But France is also not the prime nation for world conquest. They're really powerful, but they're not in a prime position for world conquest. They can't expand early. Like, my early expansions were trying to go into Spain and trying to go into England. And speaking of that, the Iberian wedding happened way too fast. I chipped like one province from Aragon, and then I couldn't even fight Aragon anymore without having to fight all of Iberia. And Naples. Like, Spain expanded way more rapidly than I did early game, and that was like a heavily limiting factor. I mean, again, if I had eaten the lowlands, I could have like nibbled northern HRE states like freely, and that would have been like more opportunities. But as it was, I had to try to break through the middle of the HRE, and that was like the worst place to try to expand, because you get way more aggressive expansion with everyone. Like, at least when you're going from the top, it decays a bit more. And by the time I could, there was already blobs up here, and it was just not worth it. I mean, I could have gone for East Frisia, but I believe he was allied, like, at some point this little guy was allied to Scandinavia and Spain or something. So yeah, that was just like not gonna happen. Another thing that really, really went bad is like simply when you look at the rulers. Like, not current rulers, previous rulers. When you look at my previous rulers, like, I'm gonna start them in order. This starting king, Charles VII, like, he lived a good 20-something years, which was acceptable. And then his heir, who was already kind of old, well, he wasn't that old, but he ruled for a while. So far, this was fine. The problem is that we got shafted with a Regency Council that just, like, screwed up, like, and, like, it says 6 years, and this looks fine on paper, but this was, like, a 12 or 13 year Regency Council that, like, forced me to just allow a pretender rebel to rise, which made a garbage king, and then an average king, and a garbage king, and an average king. This was a decent Regency Council, but once again it's a Regency Council that was replaced by the first above average king of the entire run, and this was like 200 years later, and these kings were not impressive, and it played into like my idea of like nerfing Diplo, but at the same time not nerfing Diplo because I was trying to, you know, counterplay corruption. A part of me wonders if I should have just accepted that unbalanced research penalty and just like rolled with it. Like, that may have been better. But again, that would have caused more point costs, because corruption like causes power costs and minimum autonomy. Like, it would have made my land less worth it, and it would have made my ideas and my tech more expensive. And I didn't have kings to support that at any point. Like, and even now, I'm still in a Regency Council for another 6 years. Like, that's just like early Regency Council in 1490, that's just too limiting. Like, there was nothing I could do for like 10, 12 years until I waited for that rebel to give me a garbage king, which at least allowed me to do things. Yeah. I think that covers pretty much everything that I think went wrong and I did wrong. Things that I did wrong, again, I need to re-emphasize. Africa, utterly worthless. I gained very little from all of the effort I spent expanding here. That would have been like, instead of conquering all of this land, a no-CB war on Georgia very early on, or like on Theodoro or whatever, would have been a much better approach, infinitely a better approach than acquiring all this garbage land. I could have expanded here and acquired so much more valuable land. So yeah, I spent a lot of effort on that. A part of me really actually wishes I would have taken exploration maybe first, if not third. Like maybe went with exploration, because I could have actually challenged English colonies and maybe Spanish colonies and just established my own colonial nations that I could just say like concede colonial region, or just like shove the colonial region inside of my own. But that was not gonna happen, and right now, like, that's the problem, is that colonial wars right now against England are just not gonna happen until I drop like hundreds of troops in America. Because let's just look at English Mexico for the hell of it. If I look at the military ledger of English Mexico, he has 25,000 troops, which is pretty big. Like, England himself has 50k. Well, if he has 25,000, it might not be as bad, but I think USA is the real factor here. Because he's independent. Like, I think colonial nations are limited, but USA has 49,000 troops. Like, by himself. So to fight him, I would have needed to drop about 50 to 60,000 troops. Like, again, because, like, I fell behind in tech, and I was never able to catch up. At no point did I ever have a hope of catching up. I didn't have a single good monarch that, like, gave me that hope. I had one. I had a 444. He gave me hope, but, like, one rule of a 444, and that being the best, was not really enough to catch up. Like, Diplo Tech is still 18. Like, I still don't have the second admin tech. It's almost 1700 and I still don't have imperialism. Like, Austria has imperialism, Spain has imperialism, but I just don't. And without it, I can't expand wherever I want. I can't be like, hey, there's an island over there, I'm gonna eat it because I'm bored. Like, I can't just like say, hey, Marina, get eated, because they're over there and I can't reach them. So that went wrong too. And again, I relied way too heavily on vassals and on vassal feeding. There are vassals that I made that I should have just eaten way faster than I ended up doing. I had too many vassals way too often. And that, coupled with the fact I was losing Diplo slots on the electors. Like, I should have chosen either HRE or vassals and not gone for all of it. Because, and even then I say that, but my vassals would have been incredibly useless. Like, not once did I ever say, like, man, my vassals are actually helpful. Like, Iraq, Cyprus, and Togourt combined weren't even able to fight that many Ottoman. Like, that many Ottoman had, like, 30,000 troops. And even if these three pulled their troops together, they could not win. They might be able to defeat the one province Trebizond if they pulled their forces. Maybe. But I wouldn't count on them. That's how sad it was. But yes, this was, despite being a failed attempt, I would say I have learned, I personally as a player, a lot more than if this had been a successful attempt. Because successful attempts, like, everything goes swimmingly, at least on the surface. Like, when you see people making these world conquests, like, I've seen some that are like, yeah, I saved it from the skin of my teeth, but people who know what they're doing and who've done it before, like, everything just goes swimmingly and they clearly know what they're doing. I had no idea what I was doing, and I have learned a lot. My next attempt, if it ever comes, should go a lot better. But for now, I will thank you guys for watching, and I will see you next time in the next series, which may or may not wait for 1.18, and in the meantime, I'm gonna tackle a different Paradox game. See you guys next time.